All right, let's look at this guy right here. This is the guy. This guy is a tremendously important guy. He's a one-name guy. I think he had more names in this, but we call him Aristotle. And Aristotle is a really important guy. And one of the ways that he's important is that he was part of a progression of Greek philosophers who really, their ideas shaped Western civilization as profoundly as anyone else's. And this little progression starts with Socrates, who, if I'm not mistaken, he wasn't really interested in having things written down. He actually thought about writing the same way that some people think about computers these days, and that you say, I don't know if that really helps anybody learn anything, just writing it down. Maybe it's better to just know things and be able to talk about them. His student was Plato, and Plato's student was Aristotle, and Aristotle's student was Alexander the Great. And Alexander the Great is an important guy because he conquered much of the civilized Western world at the time, and so he spread the ideas of these three guys all over the place, and they really transformed the world. And they transformed the world like in very particular ways that have to do with things like science, like that it exists, like reasoning. I like to call it like the technology of thinking. Like, how can you think things? What things can you think? The language that's used to describe what can be thought. And philosophy, of course, as well. And Aristotle particularly, maybe the most important one right now. So that puts him in context. The year for him is, I don't know, I'm just going to say, I didn't write it down, like 235 BC, if I'm not mistaken. So this is all over 2,000 years ago. That's Aristotle. That's him. He looks like that because he can look like that because he's pretty important. So if you feel like he's looking at you and judging you, yeah, he is. Maybe he is, because you haven't invented anything yet, like science, and he did. He invented those things. So right now what we're going to talk about within the context of this project, which you're about to make an argument. You're about to make an argument before the Supreme Court. And so you really need to know what Aristotle had to say about argument. And he has a very famous set of what he calls appeals. 3 different ways to appeal to different aspects of your audience, different ways to understand an argument. It's frequently called the Rhetorical Triangle, or Aristotle's Rhetorical Triangle, and I'll just do a little triangle here. I actually don't know which way it normally is, but I'll do it like this way. Pathos, Ethos, and Logos, or Pathos, Logos, and Ethos. How should you say it? I don't know. It depends on how smart you want to seem. If you want to seem really smart, it's pretty good to pronounce them in using the Greek. If you want to seem like a philosopher, if you don't really care, nobody's going to think that you're. If you're say Pathos, you're really okay. What are these things? Well, I'm going to talk about each one of them in the context of making an argument. So, logos is an appeal that you would make so that your audience says, "Man, this fits. This argument is logical. It seems like this guy knows what he's talking about. It's reasoned. The pieces, they fit together." And reason, there's really 2 different types of reason that Aristotle described, and they are sort of opposite. One of them is called inductive reason, and the other one is called deductive. Inductive reason works like this. Let's say that you've got a little bag, I'll draw a picture of a bag here. Let's say you've got a little bag, and that's a bag. And you pull out of the bag. You don't know what's in the bag, but you pull the first thing out, and it's a black marble. And then you pull the second thing out, and it's a black marble. Then you pull the third thing out, and it's a black marble. And you can tell that there's more marbles in there. And so maybe you would say, based on inductive reasoning, this bag is full of black marbles because the 4 that you picked were all black. Does that mean it necessarily is full? No, but there's a chance that it is. It's a pretty good chance if you've been taking a random marble and the first 4 are black, that the rest are black. But that's what inductive reasoning is. Deductive reasoning is more powerful. It's preferred. Deductive reasoning is like really what science is built on, which is you make a general principle. So we would say that there's a general principle, and then which is nice and wide. It applies to everyone. And then you pick out one specific instance and you say, see, that's one of those things. So let's say that the general principle is, I'll just use this as an example. A general principle that we have in the United States that comes from the Declaration of Independence is all men are created equal. That's in our Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. That's a general, it says something about the entire category of men or human beings as we would interpret it now. Therefore, if you have any man, so therefore, specifically, Jim Bob is equal to others, to all. All right, so that would be, let's make a big box around logos because now we're going to move on. So that's logic. And logic answers questions. Logic has issues of like consistency. Is it consistent? It's based on like a law. Does the law apply consistently? Now I'm talking a little bit about more specifically what's going on in this project right now, but that's logos. Ethos. And now I'm going to introduce our constitutional question. So let's say, because right, we're talking about argument, and all Supreme Court cases are arguments, where you have one side versus the other side. So let's say that we're having an argument right now about, is slavery right? Which sounds like an insane argument to have right now, but looking at our history, that has not always been the case. It used to be a very important argument to have and to solve. And in fact, solving this argument was catastrophic for the United States, and hundreds of thousands of people were killed in the process of solving this question. Is slavery right? Now, obviously, we know that slavery is wrong, so let's look at some of the logic that was used at the time. So we're going to start with logos. All right, logos. So is slavery right? The logical question about is slavery right, on the one side that would say that slavery is wrong, you would say, look at our Declaration of Independence. Our Declaration of Independence says all men are created equal, and Jim Bob is equal to all. Now, what if Jim Bob is a slave? Well, then there's a problem. We have a problem. It's not logical. It's not consistent. It's inconsistent. The thing falls apart because logic is kind of rigid. Logic can be, I'm going to put this here, logic can be kind of rigid. It either is or does, it does or does not conform to the logical principles. And if we have in our Constitution that we respect, or in the Declaration of Independence that we respect, all men are created equal, and Jim Bob is not treated equally because he's a slave, even though he's a man or a human being, well, then we have a problem. We have to solve the problem logically. So that's how the logos might look at a case like that. Now, if we look at our ethics, or our ethos, you'll notice that when I was, ethos is this. Ethos is an appeal to, or you're trying to make your case from the perspective of credibility. Credibility means you deserve to be believed, which could also be, ethics is a word that really fits with that. And then we could also think about the authority of the speaker. The authority. So ethics, authority, credibility. You deserve to be believed. You deserve to be heard. You deserve respect. Your position deserves respect. So you'll notice that when I was making my appeal to logic, I was also referencing the Declaration of Independence. Right? I'm saying where this rule is derived from the Declaration of Independence. Well, that is an appeal to ethos as well, because ethos tells us that we respect certain sources, certain authorities. And in the United States, our big sources are the U.S. Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. These are our founding documents. Declaration of Independence, and Supreme Court itself, the Supreme Court opinions, their interpretations of law. And these three things together, part of the Constitution are also the specific amendments. So most of the Supreme Court cases in some way or another are dealing with logic in how a Supreme Court decision or how an amendment to the U.S. Constitution, particularly the 14th Amendment, comes up very frequently. From the U.S. Constitution, certain clauses of the U.S. Constitution are often really important, one of them calling the separation of powers. And the question is whether or not is it correctly applied, whether or not is it consistent. Or are we saying one thing in these founding documents, but in the application, we're doing something else, and we don't want to do that because it's illogical, it's inconsistent, and this man will crush your argument if it's not logically consistent. So that's ethos. And the final thing I'm going to talk about, now, this is interesting because in the ethos, there might be another side to the argument, right? Because every argument has two sides. So even if you look at something like slavery, one side of the argument, the side that says slavery is immoral and wrong and shouldn't be done, could apply to the U.S. Declaration of Independence. The other side of the argument could say, yeah, but all the guys who wrote that document owned slaves. So, and this is part of that is inconsistent and really kind of crazy and wild, but it is also true. So it's not like only one side can use logic or one side can use ethos. Both can use ethos. Both can use logic. And then the final side, the final aspect of your argument is pathos. And pathos is one we see really most frequently today in our political dialogue. If you watch TV, you will see almost constant appeals. This is called an appeal to emotion or an appeal to your feelings. So if you're listening to a politician talk about anything and they say, doesn't it make you angry when, or people are indignant, they can't believe what's happening. I am enraged that this is happening or that's happening. Well, really, those are all appeals to emotion and feelings, which, according to this man, that's weak sauce. But according to our current political climate, they work. They're really, really effective because logic and ethos require a lot of thinking, and pathos requires, well, it's easy to be angry. It's easy to have a strong visceral reaction to something. And so that's what you see everywhere. In the case of slavery, it's easy to see, well, one side is certainly easier to see than the other. But frequently, if you're talking about pathos, you might say things like, imagine what it would feel like. What would it feel like to be owned? What would it feel like to have your children taken away from you? Imagine a world where you don't have freedom. And what would that feel like if you could not control your own destiny? Okay? That's what you would make if you were making that argument. On the other side, you could say something like, imagine how it would feel if the U.S. government gets to come in, overrule your state law, and take your property. Things that belong to you, things that you have invested money in, are taken from you Imagine what that feels like. And both of those arguments were made at the time before the Civil War, and that's what pathos is. Your job now is to look at your own case and find out where is the logic, where is the ethos, and where is the pathos. Again, this is usually going to be a specific amendment, a specific piece of the clause in the Constitution, each side is going to have their own aspect of one of these, and it's not going to be easy. You're not going to find it online anywhere. You're going to have to do your own thinking on top of your desks, and good luck with that. And then after you find it and you construct it and you discuss it in your groups, you're going to argue it in front of a small audience. Have fun.